and welcome back to the Chuny channel. Today I'm going to be reading a book that I made by myself for a school project. And it is named Princess Daisy. So let's get reading. Princess Daisy by Chung. Once upon a time, on a planet far, far away, there lives a dog named Daisy. She rules a world where the only citizens are dogs and the cats are bandits. Daisy is a very wise and energetic ruler. She lives in Buckingham Palace, situated near a clear, glittering lake where an abundance of merdogs roam. Also, she is surrounded by mystical unidogs that keep her company. The immense palace boasts 355 rooms, including 95 bathrooms. Guarding her palace, there are dozens of dogs commanded by their leader, Sir Barks-a-Lot. Daisy possesses a magical wand embedded in hundreds of diamonds. One midsummer's evening, she strolled into the lush garden to practice her magic. She transformed a cup into a cupcake and pouring water into sweet orange juice. She practiced all evening until she converted a plate into rubies. She howled with joy until the sky was pitch black. After all the excitement, she climbed up into the palace. She slipped into her pajamas and dozed off into a deep, deep sleep. During her peaceful sleep, Sir Barks-a-Lot and a couple of other guards decided it was time to hit the sack. Therefore, Sir Barks-a-Lot made some of the tired dogs work another shift. They howled and whined in disappointment. It is now 12 a.m., and all the lights in the kingdom vanished. The only source of light was a couple of lit candles on the walls of the palace. The soldiers became drowsy after 10 minutes. Some of them even fell asleep. Suddenly, at 1:45 a.m., a shady, slim figure appeared, visible from where the guards were standing. Noticing that the dogs were in a slumber, the shady figure cackled in amusement. Since she is so skinny, she slipped right between the palace gates and stepped into the gloomy light. There, standing in the dim light, was a black cat. She cautiously inched towards the palace walls, where her paw accidentally landed in a warm glass of orange juice. She tugged it out and hissed in annoyance. She glared back at the glass, and in the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of a glittering golden wand. She chuckled and held up the glimmering staff. She wielded it with much power and concealed herself in a bush behind the gate, where she discovered her source of power. The next blistering hot morning, Princess Daisy arose from her pleasant slumber. She wriggled into her purple and pink grand cage dress and gracefully strolled down the stairs. She strides into the throne room and sat down on her elegant throne. When she noticed that her staff was missing, she pondered of where it might be. Suddenly, she remembered that she was practicing with it in the garden. She leaped out of her throne and dashed out of the glass doors and into the wonderful garden. She scoured all over the palace, but no wand was found. She howled in disappointment and started to drift back to the castle when she heard the rustling of leaves behind her. Out of nowhere, a black cat rushed into the palace doors and locked Daisy out. Suddenly, Daisy heard high-pitched barking and howling inside what used to be her palace. A minute later, Daisy's servants, guards, and unidogs were dashing out of the castle, terrified. Sir Barks-a-Lot informed former Princess Daisy that there was a black cat taking over the castle with a powerful scepter. Then he barked and ordered his soldiers to go back inside, but they whimpered and slowly paced away. They heard deafening cackles. One time she stated that she was now Queen Katarina, the great ruler of the kingdom. Daisy was now kicked out of her own palace. That gloomy day, Daisy walked away, accompanied by Sir Barks-a-Lot, and started searching for a place to sleep. They had to walk for half an hour to get to their destination. When they arrived, they were shocked. All of the streets and shops were deserted. Usually, the shops were lively, buzzing with lots of chatter and laughter. But today was totally different. Had everyone heard the news? Were they just too scared to come out of their homes? Daisy and Sir Barks-a-Lot knocked on every house in the neighborhood, but there was no answers. When it was nearly dusk, they reached the last house. They desperately knocked on the door over and over. They finally decided to leave when some dog opened the door. Daisy and Sir Barks-a-Lot proceeded into the dark, crooked house. She approached the figure that let her in, and it was a cat? Daisy's confusion grew. She thought, why would a cat let her in? Was it a trap? The cat's name is Kitty Softpaws. The cat informed Daisy that Softpaw was a former thief. She had no claws and was hiding due to danger. She had worked for Katerina in the past, but resigned. Katerina started looking for her, searching high and low, knowing that she lived in Dog Kingdom. She searched every inch of the kingdom, including Softpaw's house. Luckily for her, she had built a hidden basement to keep her away from danger. Daisy believed her and was invited to stay in Softpaw's house for the time being. Sir Barkslot insisted that he should examine her home. So he inspected the house, making sure that the invitation wasn't a trap. After a few hours of deep examination, he let Daisy in. Softpaw's house was roomy and very decorative, but all the picture frames had pictures of other cats. Daisy thought about questioning her, but let it go. After all, she didn't want to be rude to her host. Daisy and Sir Barkslot's room was very nice and cozy. Softpaw brought up some newly washed blankets and fluffed pillows. Softpaw also closed the curtains to ensure Daisy's safety. The next morning, Daisy awoke from a dreadful night of sleep. Sir Barkslot and Softpaws were arguing as loud as blaring trumpets from the stroke of midnight. Daisy was extremely tired and tried to go back to bed when a delicious-smelling aroma wafted around her bedroom. Daisy followed the fragrant smell out of her bedroom and down the steep staircase, where she found a new-made sizzling breakfast. The breakfast consisted of 2 eggs, a bowl of piping hot porridge, and 2 pieces of crispy bacon. Daisy licked her lips and started licking the plate when she noticed that Softpaw was seated in front of her, licking a bowl of milk. Softpaw and Daisy stayed very quiet until Daisy accidentally dipped her whole face into the porridge. Softpaw started laughing, and Daisy giggled too. They started to ask questions about each other, starting a new friendship. They kept talking for 30 minutes or so until Sir Barkslot barged through the door, sweating, glaring at them. All was quiet except for the slow creak that the door made when it shut. Sir Barkslot didn't like that Daisy and Softpaw were becoming friends, especially with the new information she heard about Katerina. He started talking, explaining that he was spying on Katerina. He heard that Katerina sent out someone to spy on Daisy. Daisy was shocked, swaying and shaking like a tree in the harsh wind. Softpaw was shocked, just as shocked as her, or so it seemed. Daisy glanced at Softpaw in confusion. Softpaw justified that it wasn't her in a low, suspicious voice. Daisy believed her, but Sir Barkslot seemed to be against that belief. They finished their breakfast in complete silence, thinking about who the spy could be. That very same evening, Daisy was pacing around her room, thinking about who the spy could be, when Softpaw came dashing into her room. She was all sweaty and carrying a long list of paper in her mouth. It was so long, longer than the staircase. Softpaw was overwhelmed, trying to entangle herself. She explained that she made a plan to get her kingdom back. Daisy and Softpaw looked at it together, but it was so long that Daisy almost fell asleep. It was a great plan, but the problem is that Sir Barkslot had to work with Softpaw. It is like making oil and vinegar mix, really hard. Daisy took the plan to Sir Barkslot. Sir Barkslot hadn't liked the plan until he got to that one part, and exploded in disapproval. Daisy decided to keep bugging him until he agreed. Daisy followed him everywhere he went, unless he was spying on the queen, which was very often. She would keep asking him, please, 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 until one day he finally said yes in a mopey voice. The next foggy morning, they put the plan into action. The first thing they had to do was slip into their costumes. Sir Barkslot had to wiggle into one of Daisy's princess dresses, and he even took out the little crown. This costume wasn't very convincing, though, so they had to put some brown and black powder onto his face. He started sneezing, but got used to it after a couple of minutes. Daisy, on the other hand, had to dress up as a handmaiden cat. She rolled in black soot and put on the gray dress, neatly sewed by Softpaws. Softpaw had to dress up as a soldier. She put on Sir Barkslot's armor. Very soon they were sweating like they ran 5 miles. Soon they slowly started pacing toward the palace in horror. That Daisy and Softpaw were becoming friends, especially with the new information that he heard about Katerina. He started talking, explaining that when he was spying on Katerina, he heard that she sent out someone to spy on Daisy. Daisy was shocked, swaying and shaking like a tree in the harsh wind. Softpaw was just as shocked, or so it seemed. Daisy glanced at Softpaw in confusion. Softpaw justified that it wasn't her in a low, suspicious voice. Daisy believed her, but Sir Barks-a-Lot seemed to be against that belief. They finished their breakfast in complete silence, thinking about who the spy could be. That very same evening, Daisy was pacing around her room, thinking about who the spy could be, when Southpaw came dashing into her room. She was all sweaty and carrying a long list of paper in her mouth. It was so long, longer than the staircase. Southpaw was overwhelmed, trying to untangle herself. She explained that she made a plan to get her kingdom back. Daisy and Southpaw looked at it together, but it was so long that Daisy almost fell asleep. It was a great plan, but the problem is that Sir Barks-a-Lot had to work with Southpaw. It is like making oil and vinegar mix. Really hard. Daisy took the plan to Sir Barks-a-Lot. Sir Barks-a-Lot had liked the plan until he got to that one part and exploded in disapproval. Daisy decided to keep bugging him until he agreed. Daisy followed him everywhere he went, unless he was spying on the Queen, which was very often. She would keep asking him, please, please, until one day he finally said yes in a mopey voice. The next foggy morning, they put the plan into action. The first thing they had to do was slip into their costumes. Sir Barks-a-Lot has to wiggle into one of Daisy's princess dresses, and he even put on the little crown. This costume wasn't very convincing, though, so they had to put some brown and black powder onto his face. He started sneezing but got used to it after a couple of minutes. Daisy, on the other hand, had to dress up as a handmaiden cat. She rolled in black soot put on a gray dress, neatly sewed by Southpaw's. Finally, Southpaw had to dress up as a soldier. She put on Sir Barks-a-Lot's armor. Very soon they were sweating like they just ran 5 miles. Soon they slowly started pacing toward the palace in horror. When they finally arrived, Daisy quickly noticed that her castle had been modified. They were now standing in front of a huge cat castle. The castle was completely black and the moat was milk. The huge thing even had a face and a tail. Sir Barks-a-Lot had to wear a muzzle and put a gloomy look on his princess face, while Daisy carried a basket of fabric. They proceeded onto the bridge, which was the color and shape of a tongue. 2 ferocious cats guarded the palace doors. Southpaw explained that they have a priceless prisoner to show Queen Katerina. The cats stepped aside and stared at Daisy suspiciously, wondering what Daisy was doing. Daisy explained that she was delivering new silks for the Queen's dresses. They let her in with dirty looks on their faces. Southpaw escorted Sir Barks-a-Lot to the throne room, which was very hard to navigate, considering the huge hallways and what seemed like thousands of rooms. When they finally arrived, they saw Katerina sitting on her glamorous throne. Southpaw told her that she had captured Princess Daisy. Katerina was delighted with the biggest grin on her face. Katerina took Sir Barks-a-Lot to the dungeons with Southpaw escorting them. Once Sir Barks-a-Lot was in his cell, they took off the muzzle and shut the cage door. Katerina left with a huge smile on her face, dragging Southpaw along with her. She made Southpaw control the castle indoors when one of the ferocious guards came rushing in from the dungeon. Southpaw scoured the castle, looking for Daisy to put the next part of their plan into motion. Southpaw found Daisy in the sewing room, putting together a replica of Queen Katerina's gown. When she was finished, they had to kidnap the Queen. They stuck up to her while she was taking one of her many naps, put her in a bag, trapped her in one of the dungeon cells, and took her wand. Then Southpaw rolled and slipped into a replica of the Queen's dress and waltzed into the throne room, holding the scepter. Daisy took off her handmaiden clothes and darted out of the palace doors, going to gather the remaining dogs in the village. While Daisy was gone, Southpaw was enjoying the life of being queen, but during her meal, the ferocious cats captured her, threw her and captured her. threw her into another cell, and surprisingly left her with the wand. She tried to use the wand, but nothing happened. All that happened was that a rock rolled a few inches. She decided to call Sir Barkslot, knowing that he was in the cell nearby. She yelled, but there was no answer. She hollered over and over, but she received no answer. Somehow Daisy heard Softpaw and came to the rescue. She was already carrying the dungeon keys. She quickly opened the door and dragged Softpaw out. Daisy left, explaining that she didn't want to be caught by Katerina down in the dungeons. Softpaw passed Katerina, walked up the stairs, and walked into the throne room, clutching the scepter in her jaws. When she saw Katerina sitting on her throne, Softpaw didn't understand. She thought Katerina was locked in the dungeon. Softpaw was shocked. How did she escape? Katerina laughed at the look on her face. She was so amused that she made a candle flame extinguish. She reached behind herself and took out the wand. How is this possible? Katerina cackled and signaled for one of her guards to come forth. The guard looked like Daisy. Softpaw had been betrayed. Suddenly, she poured a big bucket of water on herself and revealed Sir Barkslot. He looked at Softpaw with the biggest grin on his deceiving face. And from the dungeons arose another Daisy, well, at least she thought, until she threw off her clothes and took out the dungeon keys from her pocket. Softpaw and Daisy had been tricked. The three cats started closing in when another cat dragged in Daisy. She had the gloomiest look on her face. The cats escorted them back into the dungeon. At least Daisy and Softpaw were in the same cell. Softpaw sat in the corner, hitting her head against the brick-hard wall in disappointment. However, when she looked back at Daisy, she was smiling, jumping around the cell. Softpaw thought that she was crazy. Daisy bounced over to Softpaw, overjoyed. Daisy explained that when she built her palace, she made a secret exit in each cell. Softpaw thought that it was brilliant, except for one thing. Since Katerina remodeled the whole palace, she must have rebuilt the dungeons too. Daisy had forgotten about that. She joined Softpaw and started slamming her head into the stone wall. When Daisy came up with a brilliant plan, she started to howl and whine as loud as she could, hoping to attract a guard's attention. After a minute, a cat banged on the cell door, telling her to be quiet. She stepped closer and closer until his head was on the bars. Daisy hit the guard as hard as she possibly could until he hit the floor. She nabbed his keys and unlocked the cell door. She threw the guard in, removing his clothes. Now both Daisy and Softpaw were dressed up as guards. Daisy still had to gather the villagers. She took off and ran towards the palace gates, hoping that no one would see her. Softpaw just had to take care of Queen Katerina and take her wand, which was no easy task. Katerina still was clutching the wand as tightly as ever. Softpaw snuck up into Katerina's bedroom, hiding for when Katerina fell asleep. Softpaw sat there moaning for hours and hours, waiting for Katerina to enter. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approach the door. It was Katerina. She hopped into the bed with her pajamas on. With her wand? She pointed the wand at the wooden stool, and it turned into a velvet gemstone-lined couch. She transferred her plain wooden door into a door that was made of emeralds. She pointed her wand at the plain old crooked bed and turned it into an elegant swinging bed. Softpaw accidentally squealed in fright, thinking that she would be seen. Katerina walked around her chambers looking for the intruder. Katerina looked under the bed, and there she saw Softpaw. She used her wand to shoot an invincible plasma beam. Softpaw barely dodged it and grabbed a pile of books to make a fortress. It didn't last long, though. Katerina broke it. Softpaw took off her suit of armor and took it under the bed. Katerina inched closer and closer, looked under the bed, and saw Softpaw's armor. She pointed her wand towards Softpaw and blasted an icy ray. Katerina removed her bed with her wand and was shocked. It wasn't Softpaw that was under the bed, it was her armor. Softpaw jumped on Katerina from behind and took her wand. Softpaw made Katerina into a mouse. Katerina won't be a problem anymore. Softpaw dashed up the tallest tower and used her wand to blast a colorful collage of fireworks. Just then, Daisy and the rest of the dogs came running toward the palace with furious expressions on their face. They trampled all the broken twigs, dead bushes, and leaves. When they reached the palace, they charged toward the throne room. There was battling everywhere. The dogs were trying to trap guards in hundreds of cells. The dogs used their claws to scratch the cat. One of the dogs made the cats jump off towers, and they landed flat on their feet and ran away. Softpaw used the wand to levitate some cats into the cells. Softpaw threw the wand over to Daisy, and she used it to freeze the cats into an ice cube. Daisy pushed it across the floor and made it go down the cat tongue-looking ramp. One of the dogs used her bonnet to whip the cats into the cells. One of the cats used his hard suit of armor to trample the dogs. One of the ferocious guards even shoved the dogs into the corner. The extremely intense battle lasted for hours and hours. There was no way to tell who would win. Cats chased dogs out of the palace. Dogs trapped cats in cells. The toughest guard was Sir Buxela. He was on the other team. Since he was on the other team, victory was nearly impossible. Sir Buxela trained for years and years, doggy paddling from one island and back. He was the strongest animal out of the thousands of troops. He rammed the dogs into the walls in the milk moat. Daisy feared crossing paths with Sir Buxela because she was the main enemy. Daisy snuck into the kitchen, grabbed some banana peels, and placed them behind the cats to make them slip and fall. Daisy barked in pleasure and ran to the bathrooms to grab some slippery soap. She made a trail from the throne room down to an open dungeon cell. Softpaw awaited their arrival to slam the door shut. They kept coming up with brilliant plans, bringing hope to the dog army. The dogs seemed to be winning until Sir Buxela encountered Daisy. Daisy took out her wand, pointing it directly at him. He had big, bulky armor that must have made him sweat like crazy. Daisy aimed the wand at his feet. When Sir Buxela leaped into the air and landed behind her, he scratched and pinned Daisy to the floor, asking her to surrender. But Daisy remained strong, not wanting to give up her kingdom. She used her wand to levitate Sir Buxela into the air. She was about to place Sir Buxela in an unoccupied cell when Daisy slipped on her banana peel and let go of the wand. Sir Buxela caught it with his mouth and pointed it at a tiny little mouse. It turned into Katerina. Sir Buxela handed the wand to Katerina. She pointed it at Daisy and nothing happened. Sir Buxela howled. He told Katerina that the wand she was holding was merely a replica. Katerina stood there, shocked. Sir Buxela betrayed her. It seemed like every cat had heard Katerina, since she had a loud voice. Katerina explained to Daisy that she was extremely ashamed, promising that she would help Daisy claim her kingdom. The cats joined forces with the dogs to protect their rulers, yet Sir Buxela sealed the cell door to keep the cats and dogs out of his way. Sir Buxela pointed the real wand towards them and shot a freeze ray out of his wand. Before the ray reached them, Softpaw shoved the two out of the way and took in the attack. She must have been standing there the whole time, now knowing that Katerina would help them defeat the evil. Softpaw was now a block of ice. Daisy decided to get the wand back and unfreeze Softpaw before it was too late, knowing that she was her best friend. Katerina and Daisy attacked Sir Buxela with all their might, trying to yank the scepter out of his paw, but it didn't work. He kept flipping, twisting, and turning like a dancer. It was impossible. They both jumped onto Sir Buxela, but he used his wand to put their fur on fire. They whined, howled, and screeched when they found a little bucket of water on the floor. They poured it onto each other and put their battle faces on once again. Softpaw looked like she was nearly freezing to death. They had to save her. Daisy was determined to save her friend, and Katerina stayed firm, making sure they took down the traitor. Daisy tried to kick Sir Barkslot, but he blocked it with a nearby shield. Sir Barkslot was getting tired of their insolence. He shot a huge plasma beam out of his wand and hit Katerina. She was fine, but unable to move. It all came down to Daisy now. Daisy's anger kept building up higher and higher, but now it was at its maximum level. Daisy started gnawing on his legs and ramming her body into his thick armor. He started weakening by the slightest bit, but kept barking in amusement. Daisy kept trying and trying for nearly an hour. She attempted barking so high-pitched to break his ears, just like in an opera. Daisy was horrible at doing high-pitched barks. She tried as loud as she could, but all she made was a squeal. Sir Barkslot blew several ice beams at Daisy. However, since Daisy was so ingenious, she used an old hanging mirror to reflect the attacks. One of the times she hit Sir Barkslot, she rushed over to the wand and made a fire around the ice cube that Softpaw was contained in. Daisy also healed Katerina's wounds. They had won the hard-fought battle. It was time for Daisy to reclaim her place as rightful ruler of the kingdom. Daisy rebuilt her castle with a flick of her wrist. It was gorgeous. It was a gorgeous, gigantic palace. It was bigger than the original Buckingham Palace and Katerina's old castle put together. The cats decided to make friends with the dogs, and so Katerina and Softpaw were made Daisy's loyal advisors. The palace was made to represent the new friendship between cats and dogs. Every day, Katerina, Daisy, and Softpaw would rebuild homes for both cats and dogs according to each one's taste. The kingdom was now the most beautiful place you would ever see. Cats and dogs getting along, making businesses together, helping and bonding with each other only made the kingdom stronger. Daisy and Katerina would be friends for eternity. Daisy and Katerina would be good friends for eternity, making sure that the kingdom stayed in harmony. As for Sir Barkslot, he was sent to the most highly guarded prison in the kingdom. I hope you guys enjoyed. That was the end of my story. I hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe to the Chuny channel.